Hi guys, Tausif here. Today we will talk about match fixing and why Pakistanis have been involved more than anyone else. Obviously, I'm originally from Pakistan, played some domestic cricket in Pakistan, and traveled around playing cricket and made a lot of friends in different countries. And so whenever this match fixing thing comes up, they turn to me and say, "What's happening?" So I thought it can be embarrassing, to be honest, sometimes. But I think I'll just front up and I'll just make a video about it because we're still in lockdown here in Auckland. Okay, so we'll get started. Why Pakistanis names are coming up a lot in match fixing and then spot fixing. So the first time ever, I think I can track it back in 40 years, was Asif Iqbal, the then Pakistan captain. He wasn't he wasn't really accused of match fixing, apart from one of his own players said he probably thinks that he was fixing a game. However, Vishwanath, India's captain in that 79-80 series, said at one of the toss, Asif Iqbal just shook hands and said, "You won the toss." So that is when Vishwanath suspects that Asif Iqbal would have put some money on the toss or gambled on the toss or something. Asif Iqbal retires 1980, and then he starts cricket at Sharjah. Until then, there was no cricket at Sharjah, so he obviously worked with Abdurrahman Bakata in Sharjah and introduced cricket, because there were a lot of expats from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka who were working in Middle East, and Middle East was kind of there was a boom in Middle East, so it was a good idea to stage some cricket games and invite all the celebrities from these countries, and just like a festival. So he was the mastermind behind it. And Abdurrahman, obviously, his primary interest was horses and used to bet on horses probably. So here comes another thing that they can bet on, and that is obviously cricket. So there was a lot of betting going on cricket during the 80s. Pakistan won a lot of games in Sharjah during the 80s. Imran Khan admittedly said that he put money on Pakistan to win, and he did tell the boys that, "Have put money on Pakistan to win, we better win." So I guess it was back in the day, it was norm to put money on cricket games you're playing. Not that it's not allowed now, but back in the day. So obviously, slowly cricket was becoming bigger, and there was a lot more money in sponsorships and all that stuff. Not necessarily cricketers were getting paid that well. However, after Pakistan winning '92 World Cup, cricket became even bigger, and these cricketers become rock stars, and it became quite a big deal. And unfortunately, then there was a lot of money involved in betting, and because in Pakistan it's illegal to bet, so there are a lot of under-table bookies who were obviously getting rates from Dubai or somewhere else and then putting money on cricket, and a lot of people with black money that was their hobby, put money on cricket. So I think mid 90s, a lot of question marks on a few games. I watched some of them, and when I look back, I could probably doubt, because cricket is a game of uncertainties, and Pakistan is as unpredictable as you can think. So they got away with it, but I think there are around 80 games, not just Pakistan but other teams as well, those games were under cloud. So obviously Mark Waugh and Shane Warne took some money from a bookie for weather reports or whatever. So there was a lot happening, there was a lot of money, and because there was no structure to deal with it back then, cricketers were approachable and it was all happening. Saleem Malik got accused by his own teammates, he got accused by Shane Warne, Mark Waugh and Tim May. So I'm sure there was something happening. So how these bookies approach the players and why the players say yes, I'm talking about from Pakistan's perspective. So in the 90s, the international cricketers would have two revenue streams. One is from department, which is a permanent job, so they will get something between $300 to $400 per month. And then when they play for Pakistan, they get money. If they're injured, they get no money. There's no retainer or anything. So obviously, there's not a lot of money they're earning, but they're on TV all day. So I guess like the bookies probably saw the gap and they hit the nail on the head. And they offered like, you know, huge sums of money. One of the bookies admittedly handed over 100,000 US dollars to Saleem Malik and Mushtaq Ahmed in one room. So that's the evidence he gave in a sort of his evidence statement to the court. So I guess, like, you know, I mean, all of a sudden when you're dealing with hundreds, all of it sudden you get like hundreds of thousands. That's a big change, you know. So anyways, there are a lot of games, not just Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, South Africa, and other teams possibly were under match fixing cloud in 90s. So why is that the Pakistanis get caught up more? I guess, like, you know, it could be the greed, it could be them being unprofessional, but the main issue with Pakistan in 90s was Pakistan had some extremely talented players coincidentally around the same time. And you know, when that sort of talent comes along, your ego as well. If you have, like, say, you know, 4 Tendulkars in the same team, you know, you'll have some sort of rifts, you know. So I think Pakistan was quite lucky. Wasim Waqar, Saeed Anwar, so I mean, these guys were awesome, right? But again, the personalities and everything, there were a lot more issues. So I guess, like, that is one of the reasons that any wrongdoing would have been found out straight away, because when you're fixing a game, you need more than one person, not just a captain, but you need a few people to work for you, right? So, you know, there are a lot of few games where strange thing happened, and as I said, like, because Pakistan is unpredictable, so, you know, they kind of got away with it. But I think there are about 80 games anyways. So end of 90s, there was a lot of match fixing happening. Pakistan name came up primarily because their own players accused each other. I think apart from 3 Australian players, none of the other international players ever accused any of the Pakistani to approaching them for money in that era. So I guess it was between the team there were issues, and didn't help. Mid-90s, I think Rashid Latif and Basit Ali on South African tour, they called a press conference or something and announced a retirement because they think that some of the players are throwing the games. So, you know, it's kind of, these things did happen in 90s, and players had issues with their groupings and everything. So that's one reason. Other reason is obviously probably getting paid less. Third and most important reason is that the bookies kind of use other players to approach players. So like in Pakistan, like, you know, when you preach, when you go out preaching, you take one of their mates or someone, their neighbor, someone they know, so it's easier to preach, right? So similarly, there was a gentleman called Saleem Pervez who played one ODI for Pakistan in 1980, but played for one of the departments, a professional team, until he was 42. So he played obviously a lot of professional cricket based in Lahore. So he was the go-to man. He was the middleman for some of the underworld or under-table bookies, and he was the one handing over the cash to the players and all the stuff. And he admitted to court doing that. So I guess, like, that was another way of sort of approaching players without any disruption. Like, it was quite smooth and it was all seamless how they were approaching players and everything. It was obviously wrong, but what I'm trying to say is they kind of find ways to approach players that you know, sort of and obviously by nature a lot of, well, I mean, I am greedy, so everyone, probably a lot of people have some sort of greed, and they just capitalize on that. So that happened obviously in 90s, and then there was a lot. I think Saleem Malik got banned for life. Atar Rahman got banned for life. Wasim Akram got fined. Mushtaq Ahmed got fined. Waqar Yunus' name came up. Ijaz Ahmed's name came up. Akram Raza's name. So a lot of international players who played in the 90s, their names come up in that report, where some of them were banned, some of them were fined, like all that, right? But also, Justice Qayyum said that some of these players, like, you know, Mushtaq Ahmed, Wasim Akram, Inzamam, who hid some information, should not be given any responsible positions in Pakistan cricket. So that was year 2000, right? And Waqar Yunus was made captain in 2001, I think. And then in 2004 in Zamamullah, 5 in Zamamullah was the captain. So I guess like, you know, these guys who were kind of not directly or maybe indirectly involved were given prominent positions. Wasim Akram is in and out of some prominent positions at cricket board, or not cricket board, but like a consultant, or he's there or thereabouts. So what I'm trying to say is, obviously, despite banning Saleem Malik and a couple of other guys, the other guys were still in the mix. It wasn't until 2000 or 2010, 19 when there was a lot happening during that time in Pakistan cricket, because they changed 4 captains in like 12 months, or 3 captains in 12 months. And on tour of Australia, Pakistan lost a game from a very strong position in Sydney, and a couple of players, huge question marks there. So what that did overall was, obviously, sort of people knew that something wrong is happening. Now, because in 90s you're throwing games or you're fixing games, by 2010 probably more spot fixing, that you can sort of get guys to do 1 or 2 things, which not necessarily will change the outcome of the game. However, this particular Sydney Test is under cloud for match fixing, which is weird, because you got to have like 3-4 players to fix a game. So moving on from there, obviously, Muhammad Yusuf was the captain there, I think, and he lost his captaincy for England tour in 2010, test matches as well. I think Shahid Afridi was the captain, and he, after first test, he decided that he's retiring from test cricket. Then Salman Butt became captain, and then that is when the Salman Butt's agent got involved with some sort of dealing for spot fixing. Muhammad Aamir and Muhammad Asif. Huge loss to Pakistan cricket. I think that's probably, it was, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Asif and Aamir as well, but like Aamir did come back, but I think that was those 5 years that those 2 bowlers lost. And Muhammad Asif never came back, and Salman Butt never came back to international scene. So a huge loss for Pakistan. But even despite what happened to these guys, obviously there was an urge to get involved in wrongdoing like spot fixing. We had 2015, 16, I think, the PSL, Khalid Latif's name came up, and Shajil Khan, he introduced Shajil Khan to a bookie. There was another Pakistan player who was based in England. He was involved in some sort of communication, not necessarily fixing the game, but facilitating. Again, as I said earlier, obviously they engaged former cricketers, their friends, to get something out of it. I think post that, it's only people are involved are generally sort of not reporting the approaches for match fixing. And Muhammad Irfan, the 7-foot bowler, got banned for a year, I think. Umar Akmal got banned for a year or something. Mohammad Nawaz got banned for 6 months or a year. So I guess like these guys didn't report the approaches. Now I'll just give you from Pakistan's perspective. Life is not as safe as you have here in Australia, New Zealand or England. You know, people can, if you're reporting a bookie, you're putting your families and your lives in danger as well. So it's not as simple as that. You report, someone approached you and you report it. Next thing, someone shows up at your house with 10 other men with guns, you know. So I think from security purpose, if I was approached by somebody, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I would have to think about my family before I go to the cricket board and tell them. The reason I'm saying that is because there's a lot of lack of trust between the cricket board and players, and it's always been the case, but it's more important now that these things are happening and the players are targeted by the bookies. Again, like, you know, because the cricket board, they're not consistent, as I said, like, you know, and when the Justice Qayyum said that keep these guys away from leadership roles, they got like Wasim Akram, Waqar Younis, Mushtaq Ahmed. These guys are involved in Pakistan cricket since. So I don't think that there is a trust. They were consistent with their treatment of the players, and that doesn't help. Obviously, there are a lot of changes, political changes happening in the country, and that impacts the cricket board, because chairman is appointed by the president or the patron, and patron is generally the president or prime minister of the country. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of trust issues between the players and the cricket board, uncertainty, which means that players would probably think that like they can secure future by, you know, fixing 1 or 2 games, or spot fixing, because spot fixing is like, say if Aamir and these guys just bowl no balls, so obviously for them it's nothing. It's just like, you know, we're not making Pakistan lose the games. Like similarly, when Mark Boy and Shane Warne took money, they saw we never cheated our country, we just gave weather reports or pitch reports, right? But that's the starting point with the bookies, because what they do is obviously they get you involved, and later on they want you to do bigger things, you know. So if you keep that sort of if you keep that in mind, that this was just the spot fixing, it's just the start, and then they kind of get you involved in the bigger things down the line. It's getting quite dark here, so I'll wind up the video. Yeah, so I guess like overall why Pakistanis are more involved, multiple reasons. I wouldn't say lack of awareness now, but back in the day probably lack of awareness, probably anxiety around their future, inconsistent treatment of the cricket board, treatment of the players by the cricket board, and probably easily approachable. And most importantly, the betting in Pakistan it's illegal, so that makes it quite sort of difficult to track down who is doing what, especially in spot fixing. And yeah, I mean, if you look, there's a huge gap between domestic and international cricket. If you're earning, say, you're earning 10 times more in international cricket than you are in domestic cricket. That's not the case in other countries where even domestic cricketers are paid well enough. So I think that gap and that sort of yeah, I don't know if that gap feeds the greed for money, but I think that could contribute a little bit. So overall, I think I've covered everything I can think of. I am not defending any of my Pakistani mates. I just wanted to give you a different perspective, that how things work there, and why people sometimes don't report their approaches, and over the years what were the reasons that they were easily approachable or they were involved in match fixing, and most importantly they were caught, because I'm sure there will be a few who fixed the games and never got caught. Good on them. But what I'm trying to say is, like, in this video I try to cover everything I can think of. Now it's quite getting dark here, so that's it for today, and I'll have another video if we're in lockdown. Thank you. Bye bye.